This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And Philip, hello to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, hello, Heather, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be able to speak with you and try to explain my story, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I am very anxious to share your story with my audience. And again, it's Philip Hasheider. And Philip, I read your book, 6 Minutes in Eternity, and I loved it because it had so many details. A lot of times you read a book and you'll have a page or two, telling about their near-death experience, but yours was just had so much information. So I recommend it, but I also just want to dig into a lot of it today. So Philip, you went to an exercise center, you collapsed, and you were dead for 6 minutes. So take us to that point and then take us through your near-death experience.
Well, thank you. I'm going to start out with somewhat of a preamble because those listening will need some reference point as to what I explain later. So I live on a farm in Wisconsin, and we pasture graze beef at the time that I had my collapse. And what happened in the morning, it was an early October morning that I went out, as I normally do, or did at that time, every morning to go out and check our cattle. We had 24 head of red Angus beef out in the field of various ages. And I'd go out to check to make sure that each one was okay, that there wasn't a physical problem that I needed to address that day. I went out as usual out into the pasture, and I was walking towards them, and I got about 300 feet away, and they were all lying down in the grass. And at that point, one of them jumped up, looked at me with her ears pricked forward, and just stared, and then all of a sudden took off as fast as she could across the field and stopped about 900 feet away, turned around and looked at me again. Well, this commotion caused all the other animals to wonder what was going on. They jumped up, looked at me, and they all took off and ran over by the next one that had gone first. And I thought, oh, this is really strange. And because they had never done that before. And it was like they saw something they didn't want to see, or they saw something they didn't recognize because they knew me. But apparently that wasn't good enough that morning. Well, so I saw what I needed to see, and I went back, walked back towards the house. And I had plans to go to our local hospital's fitness center, which I had been going to for the previous 8 months on the recommendation of my doctor to try to better my health through exercise. Not that I didn't get exercise on a farm, but it was a different kind of exercise that he wanted me to work on. So I drove into town, which was 12 miles away from our farm, stopped at the center, went downstairs, changed my clothes, went back upstairs, said hi to the staff. I started out doing my stretches, and then I went to the arm curl machine, which is normally where I started. And I sat down, did my 15, 20 arm curls. And Sarah, one of the staff people, corrected me on my posture while I was doing that and walked down. And at that point, when I finished, I stood up, and it was the strangest feeling because I remember looking down at my two forearms because they were really tingling extensively, like when you lie on your arm when you're asleep and you wake up and it just tingles as the blood's rushing back. Both my arms felt that way. And that was the last thing I remember for over 8 hours. And it was during that time that I collapsed that I had my experience in another dimension. Now, during the whole time that I was away, there were staff people rushing to work on me. Fortunately, there was an ambulance. EMTs were right across the street, and they came. And I know this because afterwards, a couple of weeks later, I went back and started to interview all of the people who had a hand in saving me. But that's jumping ahead a little bit. But once I had felt my arms tingle and I collapsed, the thing I remember next was being in what I can only describe as a raft. Now, I've since learned and understood that there's no human words that we can use to adequately describe another dimension. We're kind of limited to our terminology, our vocabulary, and trying to explain something in another dimension that uses no vocabulary, no words, to translate knowledge, information. It's instantaneous. So, what my best effort in trying to explain what I experience is still relegated to using terminology that we have between us as humans to find the best approximation of what I experienced, and it's far beyond that what I experienced. So it will hopefully give people a sense of what it was. But I like to use the imagery of every word has its own intonation. It has its own energy level. It has its own temperature. It has its own width and height and depth. And so if we allow the terms, the words we use to expand to include all of that energy, then I think I'm hopeful anyway that people will get a better grasp of what I experienced. So when I say I was on this raft, um, that is what I felt. And I had no idea where I was. Um, I didn't even realize that I had gone anywhere. I just realized I was there in some place that was not the health center. And when I looked up from my raft, all I could see were these waves, these energetic waves coming from beyond me and just flowing towards me very gently. What was surprising was they not only flowed towards me, they flowed through me. And I turned and they flowed past me. I mean, so I was really a part of whatever the energetic waves were coming. I was so much a part of that I didn't feel any pain of them coming through me. The thing I remember of not only these waves was looking off to the side and seeing other, well, rafts with other entities. I assumed they were people like me. I had no idea why they were there. I mean, I never questioned why I was there. I was just there. And watching them, and we were all just floating on these waves. It was great. It was just so peaceful. It was so loving, but I didn't know why. Um, it was warm, not in the sense of an ambient temperature here that we understand warm. This was an inner depth warm of mix of compassion, love, acceptance, welcome. That was all rolled into this energy waves that were coming. And so I looked up, and what I saw was this gigantic theater. the biggest open air theater I could possibly experience, except there was no roof, there was no sidewalls, there was no depth to it, there was no floor, there was no ceiling. It was just free floating wherever this was. And in front of me in this theater was a gigantic is such a small word to explain what it would look like if you put 100 million suns together. There was this golden glowing orb in front of me that was emanating all of these energetic waves that were coming out towards me, towards whatever else was out there. And they were coming in one direction towards me. But that, in normal human terms, would say that was only one side. But if we think of an orb, it's going to be all sides. An orb doesn't necessarily have a side, but we're talking about what would be on the other side, like on the other side of the moon or on the other side of the earth. It would have to be going out that direction too. And at that moment, I realized that what I was looking at was what I can only describe as the source of all creation, the divine creator, God, if you wish. You can name it whatever you want, but it is the one true essence that creates life that we understand in whatever form we can understand. And that's what I was looking at. And not only that, for as gigantic as this was, I could actually reach out and touch it and not get burned with all, because it wasn't a flame, as we would say. It was an energetic warmth that was coming. And I thought, well, this is really neat. And at this point, I still hadn't realized that I had died. I just thought, this is really a nice place to be. And so I finally decided to turn around and take a look at what else was there. And it was interesting because when I turned, what I saw was what I can only explain as eternity. Because the farther I looked, the clearer it became, and the deeper it became, and the more welcoming it became. And so when for humans to, our human brain to comprehend what an eternal presence is, or what an eternal time is, it's really a difficult concept to get around your brain. But that's what I saw. But it was like looking through a very thin veil of ether energy, which served as a magnifying glass to what I saw in the distance. And I say distance in eternity. And it didn't bother me. I wasn't afraid of anything. It just was, part of where I happened to be. The interesting thing I did see, and it took me a long time later to quite understand this. So I use an analogy to explain it. So bear with me. If you take our universe, everything that we understand our universe to be, the distance between the stars, the distance to the edges of the universe in all directions as humans understand direction, up, down, sideways, and you take all that and you compress it into a thin sheet of paper. Then you take that thin piece of paper and you hang it out here in the eternal dimension. And then you take another sheet, another universe, do that, hang it right next to it. And you keep going as far as as you can imagine eternity to be in one direction, and then you go the other direction, and then you go up, down, sideways. Those were all the universes that I saw. Now, I didn't visit them, but I saw that they were all uniquely different from each other. And so I was, while I was there, I was thinking that this is really a nice place to be. Not only that, I didn't feel any judgment. I didn't feel any condemnation. I didn't feel any anger towards me. It was all love and welcoming. I mean, what could be better than to find oneself in a place like this? So, in trying to, and I didn't take, as I recalled later, I didn't take time to really consider all the dynamics of what I saw. I was just experiencing this and uh, remembering later what it was I saw. The other thing that I noticed, and it does come back a little bit later, is looking at this gigantic orb. All of these little sparkling lights were coming out individualized from this source of energy, from this golden globe, this divine creation essence, this Godhead, whatever you want to refer to it, the source of all creation, were coming out and zipping away. And there were others that were coming back, zipping in, and ending up on rafts just like me. And if I had time to sit there and contemplate all that, I might have had a different take on it. However, all of a sudden, I was not there anymore. And it was at that point, I now understand, is when they finally got my heart started again. And I returned back to my body. And from there, there's a story about my recovery and trying to understand what it was I experienced. Now, there's a couple of things that, in trying to understand what it was I experienced, that took me a long time to really, really understand. It just, some people have asked me how long I felt I was there. And if I had a way to express feeling in an endless or a timeless dimension, my sense was that I was there a couple of centuries in our concept of time. When in fact I was only there apparently for 6 minutes. And that was really a challenge after I finally came to. And so after I left that dimension, as I understand what happened next, returning to my body, I was under the care of the EMTs and the hospital staff. I was taken by ambulance to the hospital. I was in an ER room. My wife had been called. The next thing I knew, I mean, I didn't recall anything until about 8 o'clock that night, and this had happened at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I know it was 8 o'clock because when I finally phased in, when my senses came to where I could actually recognize where I was here, the clock on the wall in front of me said 8 o'clock. And I remember the doctor saying something to me, and I said, that can't be 8 o'clock. He says, yeah, it is. And I said, well, it can't be because time doesn't go backwards. And he had this look and he said, well, when do you think it is? Well, morning, right? He said, no, it's 8 o'clock at night. So I had lost 8 hours that even to this day, I still have not been able to reconstruct. Now, I did go back as when I was able enough to understand something had really happened to me that was pretty devastating, I went back and interviewed all of the 11 people that had a hand in my rescue. And this was a couple months afterwards. And each one of them, to a person, could explain exactly what they did to help me. They couldn't remember what the person next to them was doing, but they were so focused on what they were doing to save me that they could remember exactly what they were doing. So I have this composite, of these 11 different interviews because I was trying to make sense of it. I was trying to understand what it was that happened to me. I mean, I had medical reports, I think a 6-inch stack of medical reports to explain the physical aspects, but there was nobody who could explain to me the experience of being in another dimension and why that happened. So the big question I had as I was going through my recovery was why? Why did it happen? Why did it happen where it did? And why did it happen when it did? And not an hour earlier out in the pasture when I was with our cattle that no one would find me for about 8 hours. So those were a lot of questions that I had struggled with and tried to answer. And so my attempt at trying to find these answers, later on, I felt, well, maybe somebody else would be interested in this. Maybe they had a similar experience. Maybe they could identify with it. And so it became, my way of working through it by writing it out. And as I was writing it out, I was able to start to formulate some idea of the whole picture, not just individual episodes of it. And that's what eventually became a manuscript. And I'm not here to promote a book. I'm here to promote the absolute hope that there is for all of us when we leave here. During all of this and during my recovery, and if there's more that people want to learn about, the other dimension, there are a few things that I haven't explained and they can read about it. But the thing I've learned, one thing, is that our bodies are more than the sum of its parts. By that I mean, when I was standing next to the arm curl machine, standing up and looking at my arms, and they were tingling, I had the same body parts as when a moment later I was lying flat on the floor and they were starting to do chest compressions. But what was missing? The missing was that spark, that entity, that inner essence, my soul, if you will, had left. And it had gone to this uh, eternal dimension. And once they got my heart started again, that's when I came back because my body would not be able to function without it. My essence, my soul, my spirit could live without my body, but not the other way around. So the understanding that we are more than what we are here has led to some other conclusions of mine that I hope to share with others. And I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit because the answer to why this happened was the biggest driving force for me. I just couldn't make sense of it. The doctor said I was lucky that it happened where it did when it did. I can't believe that it was just luck. there had to be something else, and I was determined to try to find that. And so several things occurred that helped me find an answer. And one of them was, this was about 8 months later, when I came down for breakfast one morning, and Mary was sitting at the other end of the table, and she had a notepad in front of her, and she said, well, how you doing? I said, okay. And she said, do you want to talk about last night? And I said, oh no, what did I do? And she said, well, it's what you said. I said, I didn't say anything last night. She said, yes, you did. You sat up in bed in the middle of the night and you started talking to yourself. And I said, well, okay, what did I say? I was really not sure I wanted to hear this. But she said, well, I had kept a notepad by my table, side table, and I started writing it down because I thought it might be of use. And she said, after you quit talking to yourself, you said, I don't believe this. I don't believe this. And she asked, what don't you believe? And I replied, according to Mary, I don't believe why I was sent back. And she said, well, what was that for? And I said, I was supposed to be a conduit of hope for those who don't have any or don't feel there is any out there. And I said, oh, then what? She said, nothing. He laid back down and went back to sleep. So there I had my answer as to why that all happened. For some reason, or at a energetic soul level, I had agreed that I would come back to have some sort of an experience like this that I could actually remember to bring back to this dimension to explain to people that there is hope, because none of us really die. Yeah, our bodies do. We use up our energy, but we continue on, and we will continue on.
And I think that is what's so important when you share your story, and when other near-death experiencers share their story, is just giving people hope that there is so much more. Hope to people that have lost somebody they loved, hope to people that are concerned about their own destiny. So I so appreciate you being here, Philip. And Philip, I have so many questions. I really want to dig into some of the layers of the universe, the multitude of universes that you saw, as well as that sphere of light that was before you. So I do have a lot of things I want to talk about, but let's go ahead and take that into part 2. And for those of you listening, by the way, if you liked what you heard here, give it a thumbs up, and we'd love to hear your comments. So Phil, let's take it into the next episode.
Okay, thank you. Yes, let's do that.
Okay, if you've made it this far, this is just the beginning of some more great episodes. I've actually recorded 4 of them with Philip. I felt there was just so many things to cover. His experience was just so detailed. So do stick around, because we're going to dig more into some of the things that he has talked about so we can get a little bit better understanding of it all. So if you've made it this far, please let me know in the comments. Just say made it. And also, I hope so much that you will stick around as we head into part 2, 3, and 4. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. That was part 1. Make sure to listen to part 2. And if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more episodes.